What up, wherever you are situated in the world? This is Dr. Kaia Niambi Shivers, and I am here with Dr. Sherice Janaye, talking about all things that we think are important that matter in the news. Welcome to Arc Republic News, and welcome, Dr. Sherice Janaye. How are you?
I'm doing as well as can be expected.
We have had we have had a very busy news cycle, and we usually talk about like these very complicated, nuanced issues that deal with global politics, international politics, the political scene, economics, but very rarely do we get into entertainment and these things. Maybe I'm saying maybe the intersection of gender and pop culture. So we're gonna talk about Diddy, right? And Diddy, I'm a Gen Zer. Oh no, I'm a Gen
Eugenics.
Xer. Look, that shows that I'm a Gen Xer because I'm forgetting. So I am a Gen Xer, and what a lot of people don't know about me, Sharice, is that I came up writing as a hip hop journalist. I got my first I got my first hip hop writing gig in 1990, either 93 or 94, as a freshman at Florida A&M University. And I was a record reviewer for a magazine called Rap Pages. So at the time, the Source magazine, which is based in New York, was the prominent magazine, and Rap Pages was trying to be the West Coast version of the Source. So it was owned by Larry Flint, who, yes, it was owned by Larry Flint. If you know anything about Larry Flint, he's known for the Hustler magazine and being a very prominent figure in the adult entertainment world. So when people talk about how hip hop evolved and it became this hypersexual platform, I know it very well. That's probably a whole other conversation on another topic. I'm saying all this to say I know Diddy. I know Diddy when he was Puff. I knew him, when he was Puff. Wait, what? So he was Puff Daddy, Puff Diddy. I knew him in all of his iterations of who he is. So these very recent and public exposés of what he has done to women, and in particular one of his longtime girlfriends, Cassandra Ventura, also known as Cassie, has caused a lot of stir in the media world, and I want to talk about that. So I know everybody knows about the Diddy, but let me frame it real quick. Do you have anything to say
I
before I go
do.
into
So
it?
I,
Let's
I
go in.
so my son's father is also a Gen Xer, um, and went to school with Diddy at Howard. Um, and so I'll never forget like lighting up when I was like, "Oh, you know Diddy, I would love to meet him," and he was like, "No, you will never. I will never introduce you to him." And at the time, I just thought he was being a hater. And now, with more of these things being revealed, I bet I have a better set of context as to why my son's father did not want me to then interact with Sean Combs.
Right. So me being a hip hop writer in the entertainment world, I have been knowing about Diddy shenanigans since 1994. So a lot of people ask, like, why are we just finding out? Why is it just coming out? Well, one, we existed in a pre-internet, world, or internet was just very new at the time. And as well, things were more regionalized then. So if you were, I was going to school in the South, but I'm from the West Coast, and all things were New York. So New York also had a dominance too. And so a lot of the stories that did come out were often sequestered and smothered. Even me, as an entertainment journalist in LA, and what happens. But yes, I have been knowing about Diddy shenanigans since 1994, and what was told to me was um, what was told to me gave me a whole other perspective where I was wary about Diddy. At the same time, as a Black woman in hip hop, it also just added to my uncomfortability at that point in time in hip hop, because hip hop was becoming a very unsafe place for the average Black woman to be. Right. So we're talking about Diddy because recently he came out with an apology on social media. And that apology was for a video recording of him dragging, beating, kicking, punching his former girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, who's an artist known as Cassie. Cassie sued Diddy in November of 2023 with allegations of rape, decades long of abuse, as well as holding her against her will, and all of these other allegations that painted Sean Combs, which is his name, painted Combs in a very unsavory light. Combs denied all of the allegations, but settled within, I think, 24 hours of when the news came out that Cassie had actually sued. Now, this lawsuit happened after months of trying to negotiate with the Combs estate. But people are talking about the video recording and as well the Combs apology that comes afterwards. And so I don't know how to kind of set this. I'm trying to set this up because what I have to say is so loaded. I mean, there's so much to say. And there's so many things. I have been talking about the entertainment industry. Anybody that know, even my mother and father called me when this Diddy stuff popped up and were like, you were right. I've been talking about this stuff for decades. And
I think that's the overall thing for me. The overall thing for me is that and I want to be very clear with your listening audience that I'm in no way condoning his behavior. I think it's vile. I think it's problematic. However, people have been sounding the alarm about the industry for a while, and it has gone unheard. And so for me, it's always about timing. For me, it's always about why now, right? Why after you say, and I felt the same way with Robert Kelly. Why for years we have heard these things, or those things, those of us that are right, both of us are from California. So hearing these things, I heard a lot more about Robert than I did about Sean. But these things have been normalized in the industry, right? A lot of folks don't like to talk about how Prince in many ways was a pedophile, right? And liked younger, girls, that didn't have as many sexual partners, right? So this idea of the industry being able to prey on women, and particularly Black women, and the way that the music industry has in many ways insulated men that have participated in this behavior
and women,
to me is the ultimate problem. Diddy is just an example or a symptom of the overall problem that the industry has proliferated. Why? So that then it now trots out Negroes from New York to sit on CNN sipping whatever he was sipping, to now then or Diddy's bodyguard to get on CNN to then prostrate the culture, for all intents and purposes, to prostrate the culture in front of mainstream media and then question its existence altogether. And to me, that's the problem, because no one was doing this when you was making all this money off of them hand over fist. Now that the money streams in the industry, especially when it comes to hip hop, have dried up because of streaming and because of the internet, or the proliferation of being able, or the idea of creating your own record label. But as these things have metastasized and grown legs of their own, now the timing of exposing how vile the industry has been for years is so opportune. And I guess that's where my biggest problem is, Kaia, is the timing of all of it. Everybody, there's people that have been around the industry who've been knowing about these things for years, who have either been threatened, who've either been paid to be quiet, or have then decided that they were going to exit the industry altogether because of what's going on. And to me, that is the ultimate problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Diddy is part of a system. a systemic problem that is not just in hip hop, but is in the industry, period, across music, film. We see in Weinstein, um, and Epstein. These are all this shows that the entertainment industry is a system that is predicated upon severe and gross exploitation and abuse, period, right? And makes its money on severe exploitation and abuse, right? So, but specifically when we're talking about somebody like a Diddy, we can't leave out Russell Simmons, but that's okay. But when we're
that's a part of the
right,
same
this is part of the same. Sorry, so you have, but you know, before you have R. Kelly, you have a Russell Simmons, and before you have a Russell, there's a continuum. Like these are learned behaviors that are supported and protected within this bubble that you're talking about, where men and women participate conscientiously and they watch what happens, and they either okay, there's some okay, let me not, but let me say this, and I'm going to go back. I want to really kind of hone in on this, why this Diddy Cassie thing upset me, why the recording and the reactions upset me, right? um One, as a woman or as just a human being, you never want to see anybody at the hands of abuse, and somebody who's trying to get away with it. You know, it becomes very triggering for me. But this is, people are acting like this is an incident that is not indicative and very pervasive in American culture, and in a misogynistic patriarchal culture that we don't want to address, and that it exists across the different things from politics to entertainment to even blue collar industries. All right. Violence and abuse against women and vulnerable people, which include, you know, young girls, young boys, you know, other individuals who might be physically weaker or you know, are vulnerable for whatever reason. You know, like there's a huge what do you call this, foster care population of children that we don't talk to. So when I'm in LA, yeah. So with the Combs thing, what I find very fascinating is how the industry is using Combs as this poster child of this excessive abuse, when the industry created a Combs, when the industry supported a Combs, and you see all these people expressing and being aghast at what they did. They have been in these same spaces and turned their heads or watched in admiration. I have been there. I have walked out of places where women were being called something or whatever. I'm like, oh, this is not where I want. This is not where I want to be. So I think that is that brings a certain level of disgust. And so what we see with Diddy and R. Kelly is that these one people become the scapegoats, and we don't acknowledge the ecosystem that they exist in, that they have fed. And these people are at fault, as at fault at the same time. But you have these lesser actors like a Cameron, you know, what you're talking about with the CNN thing. These lesser actors in the whole scheme of things, in my opinion, are put on these platforms and become the justification as to why hip hop is bad, right? When we all know that this person is a peon in the whole breakdown of the power, the power scope, right? We know this is like when crack hit LA and this whole conversation. Well, Black people didn't pick the cocaine up, you know, from Central America or Colombia. Certainly didn't fly it because they didn't own planes and didn't know how to cook it initially. So who are these people? It's the same thing with the industry, right? These record companies are not owned by Black people, you know, or folk of color or poor people. Who are these string pullers, you know, of the matter? So, all right, what's
but to me, the string pullers go back to why now. right? Yeah. Why now? Why in this moment? Right? To me, that's the string pullers, and the question continuously floats in my mind was, what was Sean trying to get? What was Sean trying to get, trying to do that violated their rules, that then removed their protection, right? Because that to me is the formula. If we think about Bill Cosby, if we think about R. Kelly, if we think about if we think about Sean, if we think about these artists, they're all after getting something that then the ecosystem in which you've described has told them is off limits, and that if they go after it, that it will then remove their protection. And what each of them have said is, F you and your protection, and they've been exposed for all the things that they have participated in inside of this ecosystem, right? And so to me, that is the question. Who are the string who are the string pullers? What do the string pullers not want these characters to have or not have, right? And why have we been so attentive then to why have we been so attentive to what the middleman in these characters have then brought to us that have made them so powerful to begin with, right? What have we been so attentive to that has said that turning our eye to that behavior is okay?
Well, you know what? I honestly, I don't even think it's what did Combs do to the powers that be that basically swatted him down and saying, you getting too big for your britches. I just think his time was up. He ran his course. He really didn't have much to give or offer at that point. And they already have somebody in place to replace him. They just look for a moment in order to validate what the replacement is. All this stuff that they have, all this stuff, there's already been documentation about his behavior,
which is
right?
Exactly. But my thing is that they kept digging. I guess what I'm saying is that he settled right in 24 hours.
Right.
This tape has come out. That was in November. This tape just came out.
Oh yes.
A couple of weeks ago. They've been had this.
I guess I'm trying to say that this is a manufactured takedown. And the manufactured takedown does not necessarily have to be that the person that they're removing is as a result of them going against their master.
Oh, no. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
What I mean is, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I definitely think, well, let me also say, in the case of Diddy, I think the grooming of Young Miami was starting to seem in many ways repetitive to his behavior, and that some people were uncomfortable with that when it comes to him in particular. I guess my larger question is for Black people in general, and and not necessarily the powers that be as far as smacking Diddy down, but what I'm saying is the level of distraction that then it produces for the Black community, right? And I don't mean distraction as far as this shouldn't be discussed or be to be talked about. What I'm saying is that now this has become a dangling carrot. But why is it the dangling carrot? What else is there? What else is behind this that we are not then dealing with as to why we're dealing with this dangling carrot? Because all we're seeing is this very surface level analysis about what's happening. We are not digging behind the dangling carrot that's before us.
Right. I'm glad you said it. You said it in that way, because people have been talking about specifically Combs's behavior for decades at this point, publicly. Not even privately, and all of the people in Combs's circumference. I'll give you some, like, I have some very real, people contact me and want me to cover stories. But let me explain something. When you are up against a powerhouse that's backed by multiple corporations, like a Combs or a Sean Carter or a Weinstein or a Epstein, you have to be prepared for the blowback, and so I think the in understanding what you were saying, like what are the systems at play behind what is presented, there's a lot to kind of think about, because they're like, so the people who already are talking about this problematic behavior, their videos or their interviews often get, sorry, if you hear that, I live in, you hear that? Do you hear the little boom back? Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. So their interviews get killed, their podcasts get, squashed, the money gets pulled out. So all of these tactics are happening as these people have death threats, people have lost jobs. So what you're seeing now is this, as to what you're saying, it is coming out because it was allowed to come out, right?
Well, and you know who the very first person I thought about when it all came out was? Yeah, they had to wait. They had to wait till Clarence Avant died before they were able to really get their hands on him. Right. That was my first. That was my first thought of the entire situation. Right. When Clarence Avant, after they did this piece on The Godfather and celebrated Clarence Avant and had him on the Walk of Fame and everything. And, in many ways, his time had ran out because he was becoming older. And they wanted to honor him in many ways for all the things that he was able to do that was trailblazing, and all the things that he's done to save their ass, right? I immediately, when his house was first broken in and his wife died, I said, oh yeah, there's some folks that they want to get their hands on, that they know that the only way they'll be able to get their hands on them is if Clarence Avant is out of the way.
Interesting.
And I knew that, well, if you go back to the documentary that they did on Clarence Avant on Netflix, Diddy was singing his praises to the high heavens, and so he was the very first person I thought about when the lawsuit came out last fall. He was the very first person I thought about. But when they broke into his house and they killed his wife, the first thing that came to my mind was there's something that the industry wants to remove protection from. There's somebody they're trying to get to. This is even before Diddy. There's somebody they're trying to get to that they need Clarence Avant out of the way to be able to get to them. And Clarence Avant his wife was the love of his life. Very, very, very much a family man. And once his house was broken into and his wife died, I knew that he wouldn't live much longer, right? Because his wife was his life in many ways. And so that was the first thing that I thought to myself was, I wonder who they trying to get to. I wonder who they get to. I wonder who. And the reason I say that is that I'll never forget inside the documentary. This was when Michael was up against Sony, and they showed this picture of all of the lawyers for each side of the issue lined up, and they asked, who's the black guy? Who's the, all the white attorneys, whether they were Jewish or not, but they were all, lined up on both sides. In this shot, it's on Netflix, unless Netflix has taken the documentary down. And someone said, "Oh, that's Clarence Avant. He's here to make sure the deal goes well for both sides." Right. And so, it just draws to me more questions, not necessarily just about Diddy in particular, but about the role that Clarence Avant played, because I believe Diddy is a symptom of a larger problem, right? Of a larger industry-wide issue, right? That in many ways is being played out with Kendrick and with Kendrick and Drake as well, right? And so my very first thought was Clarence Avant's death has allowed for things to happen that may not have played out the way they're currently played out if he was still alive.
So I'll say this. I didn't know who Clarence Avant was. Until I saw the documentary. And so I thought I knew a little bit about Hollywood, Black Hollywood in particular. and I didn't, which actually kind of validated what I tell a lot of people. People think Hollywood and LA are synonymous, and they're not. Absolutely. Hollywood is a small little nugget in LA, the city, and definitely LA, the county, because the city and the county are two different things. But it has a lot of cultural salience around the world. So what happens on an average day in LA is not what happens in Hollywood. Same thing. Black Hollywood is not Black LA. Two totally different worlds to a large degree. However, but because of segregation and racism, Black people coexisted in Black communities, celebrities, longer than white celebrities did. So up until I would say the early 90s, you still had like the LA Lakers and like these old, Black Hollywood living in Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw area, which is, down the street is Inglewood, right? Which is the, Black working class or unionized people working for the, city. So there were always some leakages because, Black actors and talent really didn't have full access into Hollywood like that until probably like a Denzel Washington. And though that's a far and few between type of person.
And some people
right?
will even, and some would even still argue, Kaia, that segregation still exists, right?
It still does exist.
Most black celebrities live in Calabasas now, right? Like they still don't live, right, even in the same areas with a lot of the white celebrities. And anytime a Black celebrity starts living next to white celebrities, it sends antennas up inside of the Black celebrity community, like, why are you over there, right? So I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that like you said, in the late 80s, early 90s, I think there was also a level of consciousness that existed that then allowed then for those fissures or those intersections to remain where they were, because there was a level of consciousness about, do you want to take your money out of these communities, right, and then put it with the people that that are oppressing you. And I don't think that is the same thought process or that same level of consciousness exists in today's Black Hollywood that it did in the times that you're referring to.
Right. So let me tell, and I'm talking about LA because I have to emphasize the New York entertainment scene is different from the LA entertainment scene. New York at the time, and still, but more so then, is known for their Broadway plays and print publications. That was New York. LA is music, film, TV, right? So excuse me for a minute. Girl, if you got a yawn, girl. So what happens, what you're talking about, because of the proximity of the average Black person you saw on TV was either in Black communities or adjacent to like an average Black community, there was more accountability because there was just more day-to-day engagement. You know what I'm saying? Like Vanessa, I remember my editor back at the newspaper I wrote for, said that her mother and Vanessa Bell Calloway worked at Macy's at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall before she was in Coming to America, right? So I know older folk who say that they used to go to the Black Hollywood Lakers parties back in the 80s, right? In Freebase. But anyway, that's a whole but
Lenny Kravitz Lenny Kravitz, I think, just went back to his like family home in
Baldwin Hills. Because we see a lot of people, and the reason is that also LA was highly segregated in its real estate. It was hard as a Black person to get a house in certain pockets still today. In Los Angeles too, a Clarence Avant or a Flip Wilson or whomever, they are the rare. But see, they fall into this is how Diddy falls into the category. Because also, let me kind of finish this point in terms of like the relationship of the Black celebrity in the Black community and why this is very important. Diddy represents, and this is somebody up the street. You remember that show Moesha?
Yeah.
With Brandy? The daddy, Mr. Was that Ogun? Whoever the daddy was in Moesha, Moesha's daddy, his mother lived up the street from me. And then 3 houses down, one of Ray Charles's daughters from an outside relationship. So we grew in proximity of these black folks. So if you're like just a typical Angeline, like Black Hollywood doesn't do anything for you. But there's a formula that's created in order to kind of keep this distinction. One, most people in Black Hollywood are not from LA. They are transplants coming to LA to make it big. That creates a whole demarcation. The typical Black Angelino is people are from the South. We are considered very country. We are considered very crude and rudimentary. So it was actually really interesting. I used to see people from my high school at some of these industry parties I used to go to, but I also was very hyper aware that a lot of these people were from the East Coast, which is part of this demarcation. Diddy, by the time I'm like an entertainment editor in LA, and that's like 2000, had actually left Black Hollywood. And what I mean by that is that the people he was surrounded with were not usually Black people. And so he did not have that level of accountability because we simply didn't have that access. So you know what I mean? So we also have to, if you, they don't, this is why, the age of digital has killed print, because it also kills this documentation. When you start seeing Diddy, who's that woman who got like 30 million facial surgeries? This is like the Italian people, the Versace people or whatever. He's in Europe. He's in, he now has pretty much left the typical Black, he's basically out. Russell Simmons, these moguls are not even interacting. What made Suge Knight an attractive player in the music industry is Suge Knight maintained his LA roots. It was some thuggery going on, but this is why you would have people from the East Coast flying to LA to get protection and some type of advocacy from Suge Knight, because he maintained, being connected, to the community. Does that make sense?
No, right. he stayed connected. Suge Knight stayed to the overall Black aesthetic and politics, is what you're really saying.
And he stayed local, and he physically stayed local too, as well.
Right. Whereas Diddy in many ways became an industry boy, right? I mean,
correct.
And our proof of that is Mace. Right. Our proof of that is Mace and Mace's and Mace's exit, and Mace's very quiet exit, if that makes any sense. That our proof of in many ways, Mace not wanting to be connected in many ways to the places that Sean was going. Mace said, I'm good on that. I mean, if I lose money, that's fine. If I lose status, that's fine. If I have to go to the shadows, that's fine, because there are certain things that I'm unwilling to participate in, because I have no desire to be disconnected from the Black politic.
And let me say this as well. You said how Combs was the industry boy. He was also he was the mascot for the white media entertainment. So but it's masked in Black excellence, right? And what I mean by mascot, he becomes a figurehead for Ciroc. He becomes a figurehead for the Sean John line. But these are all corporations that are largely controlled and funded through white dollars. But
well, absolutely, because Ciroc is French.
Right, but he's presented to Black people as this entrepreneur who used his savvy in order to position himself, and now he's this multimillionaire and he's living and flying all over the world. But what we didn't know at the time was he was a mascot. He was simply a figurehead, and he was a puppet like the rest of us, right? Another thing that also is coming out, and it'll be very interesting to see this. And I've heard this, and I cannot remember. I've had a lot of interviews over the years in terms of where I've been, and a lot of these are offline, so people will not know. But there were talks about how hip hop became the global drug runner a very long time ago. And how, part of funding hip hop or being in it was very closely tied to not only the distribution of it, of drugs, and at the same time connected to the adult or underworld entertainment world. So these things talking about trafficking and everything are not far off. They're not these conspiracy theories. But I also want to go ahead.
Well, not only are they not conspiracy theories, I think that that again plays into those questions I asked from the beginning of why, right? And as puppets become more boisterous, or as puppets become, regardless of not necessarily talking about Diddy, but just puppets, period. As puppets become more boisterous, become more fueled, more financed, they become more vocal, right? And so when we're talking about drugs and the proliferation, I do not find it in any way coincidental that the downfall of Diddy is in many ways paired then with the opioid crisis that we're seeing in the country.
Excellent.
And that now that we're on this recovery tip, right, that he now has to, we weren't on this recovery tip a couple of years ago, right. But now that we're on this recovery tip, right, the misfortunes of Sean Combs are now dropping the same time as we're now on this recovery tip when it comes to opioids, right? I don't find those things to then be not in any way related. And so I believe that not only the trafficking of humans, I also then believe, right, the distribution of drugs, and I also then have everything to do within the distribution or the influence of hip hop across the world has also been problematic, right? And this is where if there is no place in the world I've gone yet, Kaia, where I haven't heard their version of hip hop. I've heard it in Hispanic culture. I've heard it in Korean culture. I've heard it in Indian culture, right? There's not been any place that I've gone where this idea of hip hop or its maturation culturally or ethnically has not been displayed. But I think that has everything to do with its connection then in its connection to drugs, right? And that the proliferation of drugs plays a role in that. Something that you said to me earlier or years ago, right? The illegitimate always then satisfies the legitimate, right? And so then the question then becomes, what inside of the illegitimate what inside the illegitimate had become unsettled enough then to see this level of swing that we are now seeing in the industry, where a very small speck of the problem being Sean Combs.
Let me tell you, I think you made a really good point. The proliferation of hip hop no longer needs a Sean Combs anymore. If you have all of these hip hop expressions, so what we're seeing, and this is what we're talking about in the States, is that we're seeing hip hop, but Black people from America have completely damn near been removed from it and out of it. So that's why I say he's no longer necessary. He doesn't do good social media, hence his apology. People have tore that up. Hip hop has become this global phenomenon where you have now kind of like these hybrids and expressions. And then now how hip hop even comes to be, the origins and the historical origins. Now, if you leave it to some people, it's Puerto Ricans and Jamaicans are the ones who are the originators of hip hop. So so Black people have been removed. It's irrelevant. And what we know with trade routes and how they pop up, right, is that if you have a hip hop in Indonesia, or if you have a hip hop in Malaysia, where you can drive through these you know what I mean, what they take for the opioids, then you are no longer necessarily needed, because you have all of these millionaires that have been created in these global politics that don't need somebody to move that way that a Combs has moved, right? You already have established trafficking routes and so on and so forth. But I just really believe Diddy just did bad. he was bad optics at this point. Like he didn't serve a lot of folk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, not only did he not serve a lot of folk, to me, you're backing into my comment about Clarence Avant, right? Because Clarence Avant, in many ways, was tied to those levels of roots, though, right? Because he's tied to the same people that control that type of behavior, or that control that type of commerce, right? And so what I'm saying is that without that Sean Combs as a caricature is necessary, to your very point, when it's serving their interest, right? And so the question then still becomes is, what is the ultimate interest? What are they ultimately after, right? Because as we've established here, Sean was just a pawn in the game. And I guess what's disgusting about the entire thing is that Sean's a pawn in your larger game, while we are celebrating in many ways the deformation of Black women.
Yeah. So several things. There's a regime shift that's happening across the board throughout the world. As we see, there's a lot of, I don't know if you remember this, we might, well, I don't think we weren't doing the podcast, but we were definitely having conversations in like 2018, 2019. You saw a lot of CEOs silently, sell their shares and leave their positions, including like Google and Microsoft and so on and so forth. You also saw simultaneously a lot of these artists selling their royalties. So there's been a regime shift in place for a very long time. I think what's happening is that this, whatever this established power is kind of moving out those who did not want to either remove themselves or because they remove themselves, or they know they would not serve in a generous way this new regime that's happening, right? So so this represents a cone. But let me go back to what you were talking about in the defamation of Black women. I got a call from a friend and said, who the hell is Cola Booth? Uh-oh. And I said, oh, no, Cola Booth. Yeah. I know. I've interviewed Cola Booth. I've actually had conversations with Cola Booth in the early 2000s. So they told me that she made a statement saying that she had conversations with Kim Porter, who is Combs's dead ex-girlfriend and the mother of 3 of his children. And so in these conversations, Diddy tried to force Kim to do things, but the crux that I held, which were disgusting, you could go on Twitter and read the allegations, but the crux that a lot of people don't, I think, want to engage in, and I said this, I was talking about this last year when the Cassie case came up. They don't want to talk about the colorism that is involved in when we're saying why Cassie is getting or receiving, deservingly so, this support about how she was treated and not a Kim Porter. And colorism plays a part because a lot of people don't want to admit, when we're talking about the golden era of the 90s, Black, brown women, you might have made it, Sherice, in the club. I definitely did not. I was not. Okay. But brown, dark-skinned Black women were considered unattractive. And there was this whole cultural thread of light-skinned Black women or non-Black women who presented a Blackness were considered the most beautiful or the most desirable, to the point there are hip hop lyrics and lines that talk about this butter pecan woman. And this is how something like a J-Lo, gets this positioning in hip hop, because the Latina then is inserted as being the desired companion of hip hop. People don't want to
playing itself out. It's still playing itself out. I mean, Kim Kardashian, Cardi B, Jocelyn Hernandez. I mean,
Mhm.
that phenomenon is still playing itself out.
And the Asian woman who present as Black too. You also have to, so you have the white woman or the white adjacent woman, like a Kim Kardashian, because she's an ethnic white, right? And then you have the Latina, and then you have the Asian woman who presents either a biracial or, you know, presents this sort of
like Kimora Lee Simmons.
Like a Kimora Lee Simmons. And I said this, and I stand 10 toes down. You see, I had to sit up on this. I said, I'm gonna keep it 100. I told this person, people like Kimora Lee Simmons positioned themselves because they knew they were in an industry where Black women like me were getting played, abused, and dogged out right in front of them. And and in what Cola Booth said, she said that Cassie thought it was funny that Puffy was beating Kim and using Kim's color against Cassie's non-Blackness to justify why Cassie was better than Kim. And we don't want to talk about that, right? How sometimes, maybe oftentimes, how we participate in our own oppression, right?
Well, let's dig into that, because I think just like the terminology of like the idea, and this is just my held belief, Black people can't be racist, right? And Black people can be prejudiced against someone, but they cannot be racist because they don't control the powers that be that make it that way. Colorism only really exists inside of our communities, right? What we're really talking about is pigmentocracy. And what that means is that the closer you are, the lighter you are, the closer you are to whiteness, the more you're accepted from a pigment perspective inside of the larger cultural political aesthetic, right? The whole and that political aesthetic is tied to worthiness. It's tied to your ability to be worthy to be worthy enough to seen before the state to make a claim, right? And that's what I think that we're talking about, because had Kim, and the reason I mean by worthy to come before the state and make a claim is, would Combs have settled with Kim as quickly as he settled with Cassie, right? The ability, right? Cassie had a set of, like you discussed at the very beginning of this, that the lawsuit, or that the settlement, or that the lawsuit came after months of trying to negotiate. The question then becomes, and as we know, Cassie's in another romantic relationship and is now married. The question then becomes, would Kim have even sued Combs to begin with?
Exactly, because she had internalized, you need to be happy where you are.
But that's what I'm saying about the worthiness part of the state, right? The idea of forcing the overall state, forcing the power of the state. And what I mean by is the going to the court alone is what I'm saying. And the idea of Cassie going to the court because she could be believed in a way that Kim going to the court not have been believed. We saw that Cassie, even though she was lighter in this pigmentocracy scale, she was denounced as money grabbing and all these things, but she was far more believable, right, because of her lighter skin tone, in a way that Kim may never have been, right? And so what I'm saying, what I mean about that is this whole framing from the state of who's worthy and who's not worthy, and then how in our communities through colorism, how we submit that fact, right? That is then presented to us because of this pigmentocracy scale that we then inside of our communities then co-sign on through colorism by saying, yeah, you should have known with your dark Black ass that you didn't have a shot, right? Or you should have known that that this was all that could be given to you because of your skin color, right? And to me, that is something that we are that we are perpetuating in our community, but that is then fed to us outside of this community that we have now feasted on, and it's taken generations to try to walk away from. And I still think that when we're talking about this Diddy phenomenon, right, or we're talking about the R. Kelly phenomenon, or we're talking about the Prince phenomenon, we are really ultimately talking about, are we going to reject are we going to reject the worthiness narrative that's been fed to us inside of our communities? And are we going to allow money, capital, are we going to allow capital to dictate that narrative being forwarded, or are we going to decide collectively we're going to halt that narrative?
Mm. Well, I also so I need to also add, with, I don't think the pigmentocracy theory fully applies in these cases, because what we know in the Black community, if you have dark skin, you can present another phenotypical aspect of you where you're not fully in the Negro category, like your hair texture, right? Or your eye color. So I also want to say that there's also this hierarchy of beauty that's connected. Like the ultimate one is the skin tone, but then there are these other layers. So meaning, if you are a dark skinned woman who has very full features, who has, very curly hair, then you're considered the bottom of the rung. But if you add other things that make you not fully in the Negro category or the Black or the undesirable category, you have a fighting chance of being accepted, right? So I also want to add that, because I know that also plays into, you know what I'm saying?
I think you're just solidifying my point, because that pigmentocracy scale is not just based upon the skin tone, it's based upon the features, right? And so when you start mixing them, you can move along the scale in different ways. Once you I think we're agreeing here. I think you're exactly right. That once you start, right, that's why the colored contacts, right? That's why the colored contacts became a phenomenon to help those that were maybe my skin tone color and your skin tone color to then move up that scale, right? Because our skin tone alone wasn't going to do it. Right. And that the only way we could move up that scale was to straighten our hair, or to wear colored contacts, or whatever beauty aesthetic that was going to get us closer on that scale. I agree with that whole
right, because it makes us exotic, right? It makes us exotic. So I also need, because we very, very rarely do I talk about this, but I'm very keenly aware of being a Black woman who had locks in the late 90s, early 2000s. The only person who had locks that people thought were beautiful at this time was Lauryn Hill. You know what I'm saying? So who had locks, who was from Los Angeles, was in LA, and were in these circles, like looking and seeing who was celebrated and who was not. And as well, as much as we hold men accountable, we need to hold these women accountable.
Oh, yes.
In these circles, excuse me, feeding this narrative and participating in this narrative. And I would say, one of the most problematic women in these circles are women who knew, if they didn't see it, they knew about the abuse, and they would say something like, well, he didn't do it to me. You know what I'm saying? So, and as well, there are even women who even looked at it and mocked it and laughed and thought it was the funniest thing, right? And this is what Kola Booth was saying, that there was a point, according to her, what Kim said, that Cassie, a young Cassie a young Cassie thought it was cute, that she was played in this color spectrum, then realizes that the misogyny, that Diddy had was really it dominated in terms of his treatment of women cross border, because now we know all type of women are coming out. Asian women, a white woman just recently came out to talk about these abuses at the hands of Diddy. But I wanted to explore that, and I really would like for the hip hop culture to have a very deeper dive into the 90s. We talk about it being this era of like all this great creative content. We've talked about how also this era where you had a lot of superstars come out of it, and it creates this cultural global phenomenon. People are talking about the economic exploitation. Now we're talking about the sexual exploitation and the serious gender issues that are happening. And this isn't anything new, because in the early 2000s, there was a woman, she was like a Latina, Puerto Rican or something like that, who was, I forgot her name, but she was the editor of either XXL, The Source. But she eventually sued to talk about the sexual harassment that went on in The Source. But I remember this story that tried to talk about even the abuse. And Big Pun, the rapper Big Pun's wife, talked about how she was abused. But these same people, y'all, that you see are talking about how they are so disturbed at seeing what Diddy did, saw these men beat these women right in front of their eyes. And I do have to agree, it just doesn't exist in Hollywood. It's in our communities. How many times have you heard of the story of a woman getting abused in the community and people just look?
Right. And nothing's done about it, right?
And nothing
is done about it. And the idea of domestic violence is a norm, and it is covered up with things like what happens in this house stays in this house. Or it's excused by saying, well, all she gonna do is go back to him anyway, and all of these mechanisms to deal with it. And I think the bigger thing that it really that in many ways makes me sad for our people overall is that many of these things are legacies of slavery. Many of these behaviors are from legacies of slavery because they've never been confronted and they've never been rooted out. Because they've been swept underneath the rug, they have not been discussed. The molestation, the rape, the domestic violence, the ill treatment of Black women has never really been dealt with holistically as a community. And so now when a Diddy shows up or a R. Kelly shows up, then they become the picking for the day. And we as a community are not doing the real work to dig behind what then makes a man feel like it's acceptable to beat and kick a woman to begin with.
Yeah, there's so much we could talk about, because we could even go into the generational differences of older women asking, well, what did you do? You know what I'm saying? When these things happen. Or this idea, I used to teach high school, of a boyfriend beating a girl and overhearing the girl saying, well, he beats me because he loves me. Right. And these attitudes and these ideas and these behaviors. So Diddy, as you said, is a symptom of a larger system and dis-ease that we've had for a very long time. And I think slavery marks it, but I am sure now, in terms of my understanding of it, slavery represents in history when a group of people had gotten so vulnerable that this type of thing could happen to them. You know what I'm saying? So, like, let's not romanticize pre-slavery. Like, people want to,
no,
you know what I mean? Like, no, but we know what it is.
No.
But a lot of people, well, we were kings and queens existing in harmony and peace in Africa, and the white man, you know what I'm saying? So
Africans sold us. It wasn't the Africans sold us to white folks. So that whole romanticism piece is a BS to begin with.
We know that.
I'm glad that you did that, because I'm glad you said that, because that's definitely not what I was trying to communicate.
Right, there were fissures already, in the ethos that that were going on that allowed for this type of thing to happen. And as well, this is somebody who studies indigenous cultures. There are things that I learned about indigenous cultures that I wouldn't that we see, because we all often paint indigenous culture as being this kind of pristine, like we were aligned and balanced. There were things indigenous culture, I would never do that. I heard like, no, like you know, reading what was, so I want to kind of, you know, remove that and dismiss that in the conversation. But yes, we do have residuals from slavery. I think for me, one of the reasons being is that we know that when you go through something traumatic, you must have a restorative period. You must have a period where you heal, where you are thinking about what happened, you are deprogramming yourself, and then you have to redefine yourself for who you are. We've never had that moment. Our sexuality, our communities, and when we tried, there was constant disruptions where it was, I would say, it's been incomplete, right?
Well, I think that's what's dangerous about this moment, because I think that this moment allows us to redefine many things, and we're not doing that. What we are doing, and that's what I meant by the slavery piece, right? This idea of cementing pigmentocracy as the way, the idea of the idea of the celebration in many ways of colorism, right? The darker slave was outside, right? While the lighter slave, the emasculation of the male, right? By coming down to the slave quarters and taking your wife and raping her while you can do absolutely nothing. The idea that Black men feel this need to possess any and everything because of their inability to control their own lives. So at least I'll be able to control the woman that said that I say that I love, that I know loves me, right? Those are what I mean by the places that slavery have contributed to this. And because we have not have a restorative period as a larger Black community, it continues to repeat itself over and over because we do not restore. And what I'm saying is, I believe that in this moment, we're not doing any restoration work because we are acting as if Diddy is a singular phenomenon versus treating him like a symptom of a larger system or a larger ecosystem that has inside of it the music industry, the rap, the hip hop culture, the larger pigmentocracy that's a worldwide phenomenon, the colorism that exists, and then the misogyny that is proliferated throughout Black communities, that is in many ways accepted that misogyny in many ways that's accepted by Black women.
And I'll say this will probably be my last comment on this. The reason why we're not tackling it, because Black death, Black pain makes a whole lot of money. And until it doesn't make money, it will never be addressed. There are so many people who are using this issue or this situation and have created whole media empires, corporations and insurance companies off of Black pain and Black death. It is probably one of the most profitable things right now in the world.
Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.